Just to say, welcome to this webinar on becoming a data-driven retail organisation, brought to you by Cambridge Spark and the BRC. My name is Ralph and I'm the Head of Careers and Specialist Learning at the BRC. But before we start, a couple of quick technical things, just to let you know, we will be recording the webinar, and that's to make sure you don't miss anything, and we'll be sharing that with you after the webinar. Also, please ensure you have your Zoom set up to speaker mode, that'll ensure that you can see the slides. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Raoul-Gabriel Urma. Raoul did his PhD in computer science at Cambridge, has worked for companies including Google, Goldman Sachs, and is now the CEO of Cambridge Spark, and working with businesses to educate their workforces for data science and AI. So I think we can probably say that we're in the right hands here. So Raoul, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and it's over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ralph, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Real pleasure to be here and deliver this webinar to you all, and really excited to be working together with the BRC on a series of new initiatives for the retail sector. So just a little bit about Cambridge Spark. We're a specialist data science and AI training provider. We support ambitious organizations to adopt data science technologies to achieve business goals. In UK, we are a specialist apprenticeship training provider for data analysis and also machine learning. We work with a number of companies, global companies, local companies. Here's a few logos on some of our clients, and some of the work we've done, especially in the supply chain and logistics, I think is going to be highly relevant here today. So what's the agenda for this webinar? Well, I'm sure everyone keeps on hearing about data. I'm going to try and bring it down to earth. So what's the opportunity available, especially in the retail sector? Then I will be covering what are the roles available, because things tend to get a little bit messy and there's lots of buzzwords being thrown around. So I just want to demystify what the roles actually are and what individuals in the data space do. Then I'll talk about how. What are the opportunities available to level up an organization in order to take advantage of data science? So what are the learning pathways available for end users and for your colleagues? So through either apprenticeships in England or through online flexible learning mechanisms. And finally, what are the next steps? Where do you go after this? So what's the opportunity? Well, I'm sure you'll realize that actually data is everywhere. So what makes an organization stand out? I would argue it's not its products, it's actually its processes and the data that it produces out of those processes. That's what makes it unique compared to any other competitor. The data that you hold belongs to your organization. No one else can get hold of that. So that's what makes you unique. And data is produced across different departments. You can think about your HR department. It's got data around its people. The L&D department's got data around what are the skills that are actually in high demand are needed to block the gap. A manufacturing line will have its own data produced. Even the finance department, of course, when you look at profits and expenses and forecast, data is produced. So the opportunity is actually sector agnostic, but also each department itself would have pockets of data that can be used as opportunities. So I wanted to come up with a few use cases so that I can demonstrate to you a couple of examples of how data can be turned into an opportunity in the retail sector. So one example is price optimization that has a direct business benefit in terms of revenue growth. So being able to come up with price elasticity, it's something that is extremely important for retailers, especially when you're competing online and market demand can change really quickly based on some events or based on some signals. So being able to find out what is the most optimal price at a given time based on product availability or based on what competitors are doing is a huge opportunity to drive revenue growth. And that's just based on data. That's based on data on demand and external signals. That's one use case for turning data into a direct business outcome. Now, another example is customer segmentation. Now, there are certain behaviors, certain buying patterns that occur over time, different time of the year, based on different events, that can inform marketing strategies. So this is a good example of where better understanding of patterns can help inform decision making. So what's the right campaign at a given time? That's going to help maximize revenue growth. And again, this is relying on data produced by your customers. Now, another use case now going into OpEx efficiency. So instead of thinking about data as an opportunity to drive revenue, can we turn data as an opportunity to become more efficient and save costs or become more scalable? And stock optimization is one of the classic problem in retail is, what's the most optimal inventory at a given time based on demand for some products. And this equation is made even more complex when you have products that are can have an expiry date, right? So they have a diminishing value over time. So being able to have an accurate forecast of demand as well as products that are losing value over time can really help reduce waste and have a better understanding of what stock should we have at a given time. Now, maybe even more down to earth, which is applicable to any individuals, any department, is process optimization. You might just have a process, that looks up a spreadsheet, a good old fashioned Excel spreadsheet with different rules that you're applying manually. And that's consuming a lot of time for an individual to go through. So being able to just automate that process thanks to data and coding will just end up in time savings, which ultimately saves cost. Another example is quality monitoring KPIs. So if you think about a manufacturing line, you're manufacturing different products. One of the KPIs might be actually the yield of a manufacturing line. Just being able to collate this data based on inputs and outputs and monitor yields over time will enable you potentially to forecast the yield and predict when maintenance is required. So that's a really smart way to move from a scheduled maintenance, which comes with a high cost, to a more predictable maintenance, and as a result, be more precise and save cost, leading to OpEx efficiencies. So hopefully, through those 5 examples, you can see that actually thinking about data, thinking about opportunities has a direct business impact. And really, that's how you should think about data and opportunity. Now, unfortunately, it's not that trivial to just go and look at the data and get amazing business outcomes out of it. There is a lack of skills in the world. So some of you might have heard this classic Harvard Business Review article back in 2012. I can't believe it's 2020, saying, data scientist is the sexiest job of this century, because actually it can drive real business outcome, and there's a high need for that. Now, Microsoft, saying exactly the same thing. Today, to be competitive as a business, you got to maximize the data that you have, which, remember, is unique to you. This is an untapped opportunity, but you need the right skill set, the right process and strategy around it. Which leads me nicely to the role. So far I've covered the why care. Now let's dive into what are the roles available. Now, data touches everyone in an organization. You can categorize roles into either you are an end user, so potentially using a product, and as part of that product, it's producing data which you'll have to work with. So typically it might be, sales functions, business support functions. You're going to have a ton of spreadsheets around that you're going to be looking at, or you're going to get information about the business. So those are the end users. So that's one category. So even end users require some basic data literacy because, again, data touches everyone. Now, the other category is practitioners. Those are actually the people that are going to turn this data into value. And there's quite a range of roles available when you're a practitioner, depending on the level of sophistication and use cases that you end up working on. Now let's break that down even further. So what's the modern day data practitioner? Well, you have end users, which are going to be working potentially with spreadsheets, text files, and might be interested in automating a process or better understanding how they can come up with KPIs and metrics. So that's what I would call, fundamental data literacy in an organization. Now, the next step is an analyst, someone that is looking actually at taking it one level up. Can I derive some diagnostics or some insights of what's actually going on? So, my manufacturing line might be producing inputs and outputs. How can I turn this raw data into a yield? So actually doing that work of doing the conversion, this is what an analyst might well be doing. So summarizing different files together into a metric. Now, a data scientist is someone that is, one level up. So those are kind of like the use cases around, can we do predictive maintenance? Can I apply some sort of forecast based on this raw data that perhaps a data analyst summarized for me? So that requires a bit more sophistication, more advanced techniques. And finally, the other role, which is becoming increasingly more relevant, and I would say it's organizations are starting to wake up to that reality. It's one thing to be really excited about proof of concepts. It's another thing to productionize it into a real software that actually delivers value. Those are actually two different worlds. So there's a need for machine learning engineers, individuals that are able to turn research or a proof of concept into a real software that is maintained and monitored and works and actually is consistent and reliable. That's the remit of data engineers and machine learning engineers. I would say that's more of a recent role. And in the past, you'd have software engineers that are really responsible for building out products that are maintainable. Now, when you throw in data into it, then you get this new role called a machine learning engineer. So let me summarize this. So you've got the data analyst. So data analyst is someone that will automate reports for you, will answer queries that will help the business, come up with some diagnostics. So for this, you need tools, you need flexibility. Python, for example, is a very popular programming language that gives you that flexibility. You've got tools like Power BI and Tableau, or even Excel to some degree are typically used in that category. Next, you've got the data scientist. So the data scientist is really able to get their hands dirty and come up with models to do prediction, recommendation, and present insight back to stakeholders. So use cases like customer segmentation, stock optimization, price optimizations. These are typically in the remit of a data scientist. You've got a data engineer. Now, as soon as we're looking at scaling the work, so going from a prototype to something that is potentially delivered to end users in a real large scale system. And I know many of you attending this webinar today, this would be extremely relevant when you have lots of products, lots of clients, lots of data being thrown around. So you're going to need some real data engineering skill set. And finally, you have the machine learning engineer, which, the goal here is to really provide you repeatability, predictability, and build a system that works with no surprise. So how do you turn the work of a data scientist into something reliable in production, collaboratively with a data engineer? Those are really the four specialist role that you see in data. Now, business value really starts all the way on the left-hand side. A data analyst provides business value by summarizing data, which can enhance decision-making. A data scientist provides a next layer of value, through those kind of more advanced use cases. But eventually, if you want to turn this into something repeatable, you're going to need to invest in engineering skill set on top of that. So let's go back to our 5 use cases here. So process optimization. This is really in the remit of a data analyst. You know, thanks to coding, thanks to perhaps a programming language like Python, you can turn a manual task into an automated task and have time saving. Quality KPI monitoring. This is also very much in the remit of a data analyst. How do you plug into different databases or different data sources, summarize them into numbers and metrics that are useful to report on a regular basis? And actually regularity here is really important, right? You really need a system that gives you metrics almost on demand rather than a painful task. Otherwise, you know, you're never going to be able to act on it. So this is very much the data analyst remit. Now, those 3 other use cases I mentioned, stock optimization, customer segmentation, price optimization, this is really when you need a bit more statistical knowledge, a bit more machine learning knowledge to create models which you can test and also present back to your stakeholders. So this is the remit of a data scientist. Now, Harvard Business Review, you can tell I'm quite a fan of reading a Harvard Business Review, but you know, we've come to a world where actually, in order to be competitive in this world, you really need an analytical mindset, drive your decision, not based on gut feeling, but based on data. So everyone should invest in their skill set and become more analytical in its own right. So data analysts in every organization are needed. And this falls really nicely with our data analyst apprenticeship that we're delivering with the BRC, which I'll be covering a bit later on. Great. So we've covered the why, the what. How do we go about it, Raoul? Like how do we progress to the how? So I want to cover learning pathways from our experience working in different organizations that can really help you succeed as an organization when you invest in your people. So there are various mechanisms available when it comes to developing capacity development programs. So you have short courses and you also have programs. Now, short courses are typically really useful when you have a team and you want to pick up a specific technique or a specific technology to solve a particular problem, right? So it might be we're using a database with SQL. You know, we need to really address this skills gap now in order to make progress with a project. That's what short courses are really suitable for. That's a way to enable projects to get off the ground because there's an immediate need. Now, you also have programs, and programs take a longer term strategical view around the development of the organization itself. So for that, you have 3 categories. You have what we call pathways. So you have a data analyst pathway or data science pathway. And the goal here is to be able to upskill individuals across the organization, but really to have the flexibility in terms of when the learning happens, where does it happen, which might not be just in England, it might also be globally. Right, so this is really a flexible approach to create internal skill set, which then can be deployed on different projects over time. Now, in England in particular, you also have the apprenticeship scheme, which I'll be spending a bit of time covering, which is really about significant learning to turn an individual into a practitioner, and that individual works on relevant projects in the organizations that deliver a business outcome. So this is really kind of like the top end when you look at investing skill set that is turned into business value. So those programs typically tend to be around 15 months. And you also have another flavor, which is called a degree apprenticeship, which comes with either a bachelor or a master's degree, and that's 2 to 4 years long. So there's various options available, and each option would have a specific use case. Perhaps you want to invest in talent retention. So apprenticeships are really good for that because it really commits an individuals to learning, but also to apply those skills on the job onto real projects. Now, from our experience, really, as an organization, if you want to become data-driven, you really need a combination of all those different options in order to be competitive. So you need to be able to plug short courses on demand in order to get projects off the ground. So you need to be able to have this flexible option. You also need to have internal pathways and academies outside of the apprenticeship scheme, especially if you are a global organization and you have pockets of opportunities globally. And then you also have the apprenticeship scheme, which is a really great scheme to leverage in England to invest in either recruiting new talent, reskilling existing talent, or just upskilling individuals that are looking the next step in the career. But all of this needs to really fit in with a people strategy. So let me spend a bit of time on what are apprenticeships. And together with the BRC, we have a great opportunity for a new data analyst and data science apprenticeship program specifically designed for the retail sector. So apprenticeships, actually not everyone knows that actually apprenticeship is not just a scheme for 16 years old. Actually, apprenticeship is for anybody, you know, from 16 all the way to 100 plus. It's a great scheme in England, which enables you to invest in the skills of your people thanks to a levy. So the training is paid for by the government thanks to a tax that organizations are paying. And that's really important. Not everyone knows that actually this exists. So this is a fantastic opportunity to invest in skill set thanks to a levy that organizations are already paying. Now, those training programs under the apprenticeship remit are 100% covered by the government. Now, if you're a small employer, meaning you have a salary bill below £3 million in UK, then you only pay 5% of the cost. So all in all, it's really attractive. This option is really accessible and available to every organization. Now, I'm a strong believer in apprenticeship because the goal here is not just learning for the sake of learning, right? The goal here is to translate those skills and business outcomes. And apprenticeships is a scheme where actually 20% of the time of an employee is spent on learning, but they have to spend the other time on tangible, real projects that have a business impact. And that's really important here. It's actually learning skills to be useful to the business rather than just learning skills for the sake of learning skills. And this is really attractive when it's presented in front of stakeholders and executives, because you're making not just an investment for people, which is great for retention, but you're also making investment for the organization to become more competitive so they can actually deliver on the strategy. So how can apprentices be used to address the skills gap? Well, really there are three use cases for new or existing employee. One is upskilling. So you have individuals that are already working in the data space and they need to be upskilled to leverage latest techniques, latest tools in order to deliver on projects. You have reskilling. Those are perhaps individuals that are at risk or becoming less relevant. So there's a great opportunity here to reskill individuals in roles that are in high demand for the business. And also for recruiting. It's really attractive to be able to say to a candidate, hey, come join us and you're gonna have this amazing training program where we invest in your skill set for something that is in really high demand and has a great business impact. So recruitment development is the third category. So benefits of apprenticeships. Well, there's various studies and surveys that show that it has a great impact on retention. It can be used for talent attraction. It's employee-led, so this is not an academic theoretical program, which often you have with universities. This is very much skills that are required to deliver on projects. It's also a great tool to look at diversifying your workforce and attract new talent or reskill existing talent. And also, it's regulated and certified, so you get kind of like the guarantee that you get a really high quality and high value out of the scheme. What are the pathways available specifically for data science? Well, there's a range of options. The first starts at the data analyst level. So that's the first role I mentioned. So this is called a level 4 program, which we deliver in partnership with BRC. So this is a 15 months long program at 20% time of an employee. And those individuals are going to learn the modern data analyst stack, starting with Python, which is a really mainstream programming language that helps with not just data analyst use cases, but also with automation and coding. So those skills are really transferable. Individuals will learn about Python, Pandas, SQL, data visualization, how to work with time series data and do forecasting. So really all the good stuff. And those individuals can progress into another program, which is a follow-up, which is called a level 7 program, the AI data specialist. That's really the remit of data science roles and machine learning engineering roles. So the good news here is, you can really take an individual from just working with basic Excel to learning Python, learning how to be a really competent data analyst, all the way to work on data science use cases, in a 3 to 4 year period of time. So really investing in the retention of your workforce. Now, you might have individuals that are really competent already as a data analyst. So they might be already perhaps programming Python or a bit of SQL. Then they have the data science and machine learning engineer program available for them in order to accelerate the career. So that's with apprenticeships. And again, this is government funded. Now, some employers also like to provide yet another option, which is degree apprenticeships. For example, being able to provide a bachelor opportunity or a master's opportunity. And that's typically quite attractive when you're looking at hiring early talent. So for example, 16 to 18, new talent, looking at building up their career. So you want to recruit and develop them. So typically a degree apprenticeship is also quite attractive, or a level 4 data analyst program would be a very suitable too. Now, at Cambridge Spark, we really believe in learning by doing rather than just learning. So the way we deliver all our training courses is that it's highly interactive. So we spend a lot of time on ensuring first our curriculum is cutting edge. We're practitioners ourselves, helping organizations actually solve data science problem. So we distill this knowledge into our curriculum. The way the learning is done is through something called Notebook, Jupyter Notebook. So all the learners from day one immediately get their hands dirty. So it's really about being able to learn interactively, but also experiment. We've developed our own bespoke data science learning platform called Educate.ai, which is a project funded by the UK Innovation Agency. So it's a bit like a sandbox environment where students submit code in a safe environment using real-world projects, real data set. They get instant feedback on the quality of the code, the errors, the performance. So it's a really fantastic environment to accelerate learning, but without breaking anything. It's all really safe. And this learning gets translated in real project with the employer. And each learner gets allocated a coach, which really hold the hand of the learners to make sure those projects are not just random projects, but projects that have a return on investment. So how do you measure success of projects that leverage data? So we spend a lot of time on that to make sure that actually all apprentices can demonstrate the value back to the business. And finally, all apprentices also have a coach that looks at setting SMART goals and really help the apprentice succeed in the career. So you can see that, you know, when you combine all of this, it really makes an apprenticeship program very attractive, both for the learner, but for the organization as well. So we've got various success story. Here's just one of the case study that, you know, I'd like to talk through, which, you know, I think is really amazing. So we have one apprentice started on a level 4 program as a data analyst, you know, and one of the pain points, you know, in any organization is paying a big fees on consultants, as I'm sure some of you will have. And this apprentice, you know, within a few months on being in the program, you know, picked up Python as part of a curriculum, automated a process by, you know, aggregating a couple of data sources together, built some visuals, you know, and saved the organization £30,000 in IT consultant fees just by simply automating a process that was outsourced. So this is just an indication of, you know, the impact that an individual can have on the organization. So obviously, if you combine that with many more individuals, then you're starting to get a really good return investment in investing in the skills of your people. So what are next steps? Well, hopefully you find this webinar useful and give you an overview of the options available. So we have an immediate data analyst level 4 program starting in February in partnership with the BRC. So please do get in touch with the BRC team and myself if you know, if you want to discuss your problems. Very happy to have follow-up conversation together with the BRC team. And you know, the goal here is to really align your upskilling efforts to your strategy. How can you become more competitive and relevant over the next few years? That's really the goal. So thank you very much for your time. And I think we've got a few minutes for question and answer, but I will hand over back to Ralph.
Thanks very much, Raoul. That's absolutely great and really, really interesting, I think. We have got literally 4 or 5 minutes for any questions. So we aren't able to unmute you, but if you want to put a question into the chat, we can quickly catch that and see if we can give you some feedback now. But as you're kind of thinking about that, I would urge you to take advantage of the opportunity to contact Raoul or one of his team and, you know, find out more. Obviously, they'll be able to go into a lot more detail about what will work for your business and so on. So make it much more specific to you. Yeah, and as I said, we will be sharing these slides this afternoon, and then also the recording of the webinar in a week or so. So we just need a bit more time to get that organised. Okay, so the question there from Lucy: what's the options for those not in UK to put colleagues on the level 4 apprenticeships? Is there a cost to that? Oh, not in England. Okay. Raoul, is that something you can help with, or?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, again, so you know, apprenticeships are fantastic for your England, specifically workforce, because it's all funded by the government. So I would recommend to jump on the opportunity. Now, if you are outside of England, we do deliver really flexible online programs which really follow the apprenticeship structure, but they are funded through your L&D budget or perhaps project budget. So we do have a number of options here for both data analysts, data scientists, machine learning engineer programs or short courses. And that's something we'd be very happy to discuss if you have that requirement.
Fantastic. So obviously that's quite often relevant for retailers, I think, that question. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So, but obviously there's an opportunity to send those in, and we've got the contact details here. So I think without prolonging things unnecessarily, I'll wrap it up, and just a final thank you to Raoul and the team at Cambridge Spark, and thank you to everybody else who's taken the time to join this webinar this afternoon. I hope it was as useful as you found it useful as I did. So thanks very much, and goodbye.